poor boy rescued a millionaire after an accident. The next day, the police came to Boy. The dense evergreen forest, with its towering trees and rustling leaves, had always been Samuel's world. At 12 years old, the boy was no stranger to hardship. He lived with his mother, Mary, in a small wooden hut tucked deep in the forest's heart. Life was simple but harsh, one of survival, not abundance. The loss of Samuel's father years ago had left a hole in their lives, one that Mary filled with quiet resilience and endless hard work. They depended on the forest for food, firewood, and the occasional trade with the nearby village. Samuel was used to long days of scavenging and foraging, but the chill in the air that morning brought an edge of urgency to his routine. Winter was just around the corner, and their supplies were running low. Mary handed him a small satchel and a piece of stale bread before he set off. "Don't wander too far, Sam," she said, her voice heavy with concern. "The weather's been strange lately. I don't want you caught in anything dangerous." "I'll stay close, Mama," Samuel promised, tucking the bread into his pocket and heading out the door. The forest welcomed him with its familiar sounds: the crunch of leaves underfoot, the distant chirping of birds, and the whisper of the wind through the branches. Samuel moved with practiced ease, his sharp eyes scanning the ground for mushrooms and other edible plants. Hours passed as he filled his satchel, venturing deeper into the woods than he intended. The sky, once clear and blue, grew gray and heavy with clouds. A cold wind swept through the forest, carrying with it the unmistakable scent of rain. Samuel pulled his thin jacket tighter around himself and decided it was time to head back. As he made his way toward home, a low rumble echoed in the distance. It wasn't thunder, but the growl of an engine, a sound foreign to this part of the forest. Curious, Samuel quickened his pace, eventually reaching the edge of the woods where the main road cut through. A sleek black car sped down the winding road, its headlights piercing the gathering gloom. Samuel watched from behind a tree as the vehicle struggled to navigate the slippery asphalt, its tires skidding dangerously on the sharp turns. The rain began to fall, light at first, but quickly intensifying into a heavy downpour. The road, slick and treacherous, became a trap. Samuel's heart sank as the car rounded a bend too quickly, its wheels losing grip. The vehicle swerved violently, crashing through the guardrail and plummeting into a ditch. The sound of crunching metal and shattering glass echoed through the forest, followed by an eerie silence. Samuel didn't hesitate. Dropping his satchel, he sprinted toward the wreckage, his heart pounding. When he reached the car, his stomach twisted at the sight. The vehicle was crumpled against a tree, its front end crushed. Smoke billowed from the engine, and the smell of gasoline filled the air. "Hello? Can you hear me?" Samuel shouted, his voice trembling. Inside the car, a man slumped against the steering wheel, blood trickling from a gash on his forehead. He didn't respond. Samuel tried the driver's side door, but it was jammed. Panic surged through him as he ran to the passenger side and managed to yank the door open. The man was heavy, his suit soaked with rain and stained with blood. Samuel struggled to pull him out, his small frame straining under the weight. Gritting his teeth, he finally managed to drag the man away from the car, just as a small fire began to lick at the engine. "Sir, wake up," Samuel pleaded, shaking the man's shoulders. The man groaned faintly, but didn't open his eyes. His breathing was shallow, and Samuel knew he needed help fast. But the nearest village was miles away, and the storm showed no signs of letting up. Summoning all his strength, Samuel hoisted the man onto his back. The rain stung his face as he trudged toward the hut, his feet slipping in the mud. Every step was a battle, but Samuel refused to give up. By the time he reached the hut, his clothes were soaked, and his legs felt like they might give out. "Mama!" he called, his voice hoarse. Mary appeared in the doorway, her eyes widening in alarm at the sight of her son and the injured man. "Samuel! What happened?" "There was an accident," Samuel panted. "He needs help." Mary hurried to clear the small cot they kept in the corner, and together they laid the man down. Mary's hands trembled as she examined him. The gash on his forehead was deep, and his face was pale, but he was alive. "We need to clean his wound," Mary said, grabbing a bowl of water and a clean cloth. "Get the salve from the shelf." Samuel obeyed, fetching the small jar of herbal ointment they used for cuts and scrapes. Mary worked quickly, her years of caring for Samuel and herself in the wilderness showing in her steady hands. The man groaned again, his eyelids fluttering open for a brief moment before closing. "He's in shock," Mary murmured. "We'll do what we can, but he needs a doctor." "We can take him to the village tomorrow," Samuel said, his voice filled with determination. Mary nodded, her face etched with worry. "For now, we'll keep him warm and watch over him." That night, the storm raged outside, but inside the hut, Samuel and Mary kept a silent vigil over their unexpected guest. Samuel couldn't help but wonder who the man was and why he had been driving through the forest in such terrible weather. The following morning, the storm had passed, leaving the forest drenched and glistening under the pale sunlight. The man stirred, his eyelids fluttering open. His gaze was unfocused at first, but as he took in his surroundings, confusion turned to wariness. Where am I?" he croaked. "You're safe," Mary said gently, sitting beside him. "You were in an accident. My son found you and brought you here." The man's eyes shifted to Samuel, who stood by the door. "You saved me?" Samuel nodded. "You were in pretty bad shape. We're taking you to the village so a doctor can look at you." The man tried to sit up, but winced, clutching his side. "Thank you," he said, his voice filled with genuine gratitude. "My name is Henry Blackwell." Samuel's eyes widened. He had heard that name before. Henry Blackwell was a millionaire and the mayor of the district, a man whose influence stretched far beyond the forest. Henry Blackwell's name hung in the air like a distant bell ringing in Samuel's memory. He had heard stories about the millionaire-turned-mayor from the traders who passed through the nearby village. Henry was said to be a man of wealth, power, and ambition, a far cry from the figure lying injured in their modest hut. "You're the mayor?" Samuel asked, his voice tinged with disbelief. Henry offered a faint nod, his face tightening with pain as he adjusted himself on the cot. "Yes, though I don't feel very mayoral at the moment." Mary shot Samuel a look, silently urging him to set aside his curiosity for now. "We'll get you to a doctor," she said firmly, pulling a worn blanket over Henry. "But you need to rest until then." Henry's eyelids fluttered shut, exhaustion overtaking him once more. Mary and Samuel worked quickly to prepare for the journey. The nearest village was several miles away, and the roads were still muddy and treacherous from the storm. "We'll use the cart," Mary said, tying her shawl tightly around her shoulders. "It'll be rough, but it's the best we can do." With great care, they managed to lift Henry onto the makeshift wooden cart Samuel had built years ago for gathering firewood. The old wheels groaned under the weight, but they held steady as Samuel gripped the handles and began pushing. Mary walked beside him, holding an oil lamp to guide their way through the dense forest. The journey was grueling. The muddy paths made every step a struggle, and the cart's wheels frequently stuck in the wet ground. Samuel's arms burned with the effort, but he pushed on, driven by the determination to get Henry the help he needed. As they neared the village, the familiar hum of activity reached their ears. Smoke curled from the chimneys of small stone houses, and the distant clatter of hooves on cobblestones signaled life bustling within the town. They approached the local clinic, a modest building with peeling paint and a crooked sign that read, "Dr. Wilkes." Mary knocked on the door, and moments later, a middle-aged man with graying hair and wire-rimmed glasses appeared. "Mary? What's this?" Dr. Wilkes asked, his eyes widening as he took in the sight of Henry on the cart. "This man was in an accident," Mary explained. "He's injured, and we need your help." Dr. Wilkes wasted no time. With the help of a young apprentice, he moved Henry onto a cot inside the clinic. Mary and Samuel watched anxiously as the doctor examined him. "He's lucky," R. Wilkes said after a while, removing his glasses and wiping his brow. "The injuries are serious, but not life-threatening. If he hadn't been brought here so soon, though—" He trailed off, giving Samuel a pointed look. "Your boy saved him," Dr. Wilkes said, a note of admiration in his voice. Mary smiled faintly, resting a hand on Samuel's shoulder. "He's a good lad. Always has been." Henry regained consciousness later that afternoon, his face etched with pain, but his eyes sharper than before. When he saw Samuel and Mary, he managed a weak smile. "I owe you my life," he said, his voice low but sincere. "You don't owe us anything," Mary replied. "We just did what anyone would do." Henry shook his head. "No, not everyone would have done what you did. You risked so much for a stranger." Samuel shifted uncomfortably under Henry's intense gaze. "It was the right thing to do," he mumbled. Henry nodded slowly. "The right thing. Something this world doesn't see enough of." The next morning, Samuel and Mary prepared to return to the hut. Dr. Wilkes assured them that Henry was stable and would be transported to a hospital in the city later that day. Before they left, Henry reached out to stop them. "Wait," he said, his voice stronger now. "At least let me repay you somehow. You've done so much." Mary shook her head firmly. "We didn't help you for payment, Mr. Blackwell. We helped because it was the right thing to do." Henry's eyes softened, but there was a glimmer of determination in them. "Then let me do the right thing as well," he said. "Please, give me your names and where I can find you." Reluctantly, Mary told him their names and described the location of their hut deep in the forest. Henry thanked them again, his gratitude evident even as they bid him farewell. Back at the hut, life resumed its usual rhythm, though Samuel couldn't shake the feeling that their encounter with Henry Blackwell would bring unexpected changes. He found himself glancing toward the road more often, half expecting a sleek black car to appear at any moment. It wasn't a car that arrived the next day, but two uniformed police officers on horseback. Samuel froze as they approached the hut, their stern faces unreadable. Mary stepped forward, her expression wary but composed. "Is something wrong?" she asked. One of the officers dismounted, tipping his hat respectfully. "Mrs. Thatcher, your son Samuel, correct?" "Yes," Mary replied cautiously. The officer's face softened. "You should know that the man you saved is Henry Blackwell, the mayor of this district. He sent us here to ensure you're safe and to deliver a message." He handed Mary a sealed envelope, the elegant handwriting on the front bearing Henry's name. With trembling hands, Mary opened it and read aloud. "Dear Mary and Samuel, words cannot express my gratitude for what you've done. Please know that your kindness will not go unrewarded. I invite you both to my estate as my guests. It is my hope that I can properly thank you in person and offer you the assistance you so richly deserve. With deepest respect, Henry Blackwell." Samuel's eyes widened as he listened, a mixture of excitement and apprehension bubbling within him. Mary stared at the letter, her thoughts unreadable. "What do you think, Mama?" Samuel asked hesitantly. Mary sighed, folding the letter carefully. "I think we've already changed the course of our lives," she said quietly. Samuel had never been farther than the edges of the forest, where the dirt paths ended and the paved roads began. The idea of venturing beyond into the heart of society, let alone to an estate owned by someone like Henry Blackwell, felt like stepping into a fairy tale or a trap. Mary shared his unease, but reminded him of Henry's sincerity. "We'll go," she said one crisp morning, gripping the letter tightly as if it might slip away like a dream. "But we'll keep our wits about us." 2 days later, a polished carriage arrived to fetch them. Samuel stared at its gleaming surface and ornate trim, his reflection rippling across the polished black paint. The driver tipped his hat as Mary and Samuel climbed inside, their modest clothing feeling out of place against the plush interior. The journey felt surreal. Samuel pressed his face to the window, marveling at the passing countryside. Rolling hills turned to sprawling fields, then to cobblestone streets as they neared the city. The estate loomed in the distance, its towering gates flanked by stone pillars engraved with intricate designs. "This is his house?" Samuel whispered, his voice trembling with a mix of awe and disbelief. "It's more than a house," Mary replied softly, her eyes fixed on the towering structure that resembled a castle. "It's another world." Henry Blackwell greeted them personally at the grand entrance. His color had returned, and he walked with a steadier gait, though his arm remained in a sling. "Mary, Samuel," he said warmly, extending his good hand in greeting. "I'm relieved to see you again." Mary shook his hand, her eyes scanning the luxurious surroundings. "Thank you for inviting us," she said, her voice steady but tinged with caution. Samuel simply nodded, his gaze darting between the towering marble columns and the ornate chandeliers above. He had never seen so much wealth in one place. Henry led them inside, where they were seated in a lavish parlor. Tea and biscuits were brought out on a silver tray, the delicate china cups far removed from the chipped mugs they used at home. "I hope the journey wasn't too tiring," Henry said, his voice laced with genuine concern. "It was fine," Mary replied. "We're just not used to all this." Henry smiled. "I understand. Let me get to the point. You saved my life, and that is no small thing. I want to do something meaningful for you both. Something lasting." Mary straightened in her chair. "We didn't help you for a reward, Mr. Blackwell. We did it because it was the right thing to do. And that's exactly why you deserve this," Henry said, his tone firm. "I've arranged for a new home for you, a proper house, close to the village, so Samuel can attend school." Samuel's jaw dropped. "School?" Henry nodded. "I've spoken to the local educators. You'll be enrolled immediately. A bright young man like you deserves an education, Samuel." Mary's eyes filled with tears, though she quickly wiped them away. "You don't have to do all this," she said. "We've managed just fine." Henry leaned forward, his expression earnest. "Mary, I know what it's like to struggle. I wasn't always the man you see before you. Someone helped me once, when I was at my lowest, and now I'm paying it forward. Please, let me do this." Mary looked at Samuel, who was staring at Henry with wide, hopeful eyes. She sighed and nodded. "All right, but we won't take charity. If there's work to be done, we'll earn our place." Henry smiled, clearly relieved. "I wouldn't have it any other way." The new house was everything Samuel had ever dreamed of. It was modest by city standards, but felt like a palace compared to their old hut. The walls were sturdy, the roof didn't leak, and there was enough space for both Samuel and Mary to have their own rooms. The garden out front was a riot of color, with flowers Samuel couldn't name blooming in neat rows. Their first week in the house was a whirlwind of new experiences. Samuel started school, where he quickly discovered he had a knack for numbers and a sharp mind for problem-solving. Mary took a job at a local bakery, her hands finding new purpose in kneading dough and shaping pastries. For the first time in years, they felt secure. But life wasn't done testing them. One evening, as Mary and Samuel were settling in for dinner, there was a knock at the door. Samuel opened it to find a man standing there, his face shadowed by the setting sun. His clothes were ragged, and his eyes burned with a mix of anger and desperation. "Mary," the man called, his voice rough, "aren't you going to invite your old husband inside?" Samuel froze, his blood turning cold. This was the man his mother rarely spoke of, the one who had abandoned them years ago, John Thatcher. Mary stepped forward, her face pale but defiant. "What are you doing here, John?" John leaned against the doorframe, a crooked grin on his face. "I heard you've moved up in the world. Nice place. Must be nice to forget where you came from." "We didn't forget," Mary said sharply. "We just moved on." John's grin faded, replaced by a sneer. "Don't act like you're better than me, Mary. I want my share. If you've got all this, you can spare a little for me." "We don't owe you anything," Mary replied, her voice steady despite the trembling in her hands. Samuel stepped between them, his small frame blocking the doorway. "You need to leave," he said, his voice firm. John's eyes narrowed. "Or what? You gonna stop me, boy?" Before anyone could respond, a black car pulled up to the house, its headlights cutting through the dusk. Henry stepped out, his face like thunder. "Is there a problem here?" Henry asked, his voice cold. John shrank back slightly, but held his ground. "This is family business. Stay out of it." Henry stepped closer, his presence towering. "You lost the right to call this family years ago. If you don't leave now, I'll have the police remove you." John's bravado crumbled under Henry's icy glare. Muttering curses, he turned and walked away, disappearing into the night. After John left, Henry turned to Mary and Samuel. "I'll make sure he doesn't bother you again," he said firmly. Mary nodded, her gratitude unspoken but clear in her eyes. As the days passed, they settled back into their routine, the shadow of John's visit fading but not forgotten. Samuel threw himself into his studies, determined to make the most of the opportunities Henry had given them. Mary found joy in her work and in watching her son thrive. The twist had shaken them, but it also brought them closer together. They realized their strength lay not just in their resilience, but in the support they had found in each other and in Henry. Life for Mary and Samuel had transformed into something they never thought possible. The once crumbling hut in the woods was a distant memory, replaced by a warm, inviting home filled with the kind of stability Mary had only dreamed of giving her son. Samuel adjusted to the new life quickly, thriving in school, while Mary threw herself into her work at the community center. But even in their new world, shadows loomed and challenges emerged in unexpected ways. At school, Samuel was a curious mix of admiration and disdain among his peers. While some marveled at his newfound life, others whispered cruelly behind his back. "Guess saving a millionaire is the fastest way out of the woods," one boy sneered during lunch. Another chimed in, laughing. "Bet he thinks he's better than us now." Samuel's ears burned as he tried to ignore the comments. He gripped his tray tightly, staring at the unappetizing meal in front of him. He didn't want to fight, But the constant digs were wearing him down. It wasn't just the kids. Some teachers treated him differently now, their smiles tinged with something Samuel couldn't quite place. Pity, maybe? Or perhaps it was the subtle suspicion that he hadn't earned his place among the more privileged students. That evening, Samuel returned home, his usual enthusiasm dulled. Mary noticed immediately. "What's wrong?" she asked, as they sat together in the cozy living room. Samuel hesitated, then blurted out, "Why does everyone hate me now? At school, they act like I don't belong. Like I got here because I was lucky, not because I deserve it." Mary's heart ached at his words. "Samuel, listen to me," she said firmly. "People will always find reasons to criticize you, especially when they're unhappy with their own lives. What matters is that you know the truth. You're here because you worked hard, and you earned it." But her words didn't seem to reach him fully. He nodded half-heartedly, retreating to his room soon after. A few days later, Henry Blackwell arrived unannounced. Mary welcomed him warmly, grateful for his constant presence in their lives. As they chatted over tea, Mary confided in him about Samuel's struggles at school. Henry listened intently, his expression growing serious. "May I speak with him?" Henry asked. Mary nodded, and soon Samuel found himself sitting across from the man who had changed their lives forever. Henry leaned forward, his gaze steady but kind. "Samuel, your mother tells me you've been having a hard time at school." Samuel shrugged, avoiding his eyes. "They think I don't deserve what we have now, that I'm just lucky." Henry nodded slowly, his voice calm as he spoke. "Do you know why people say those things? It's because they don't understand. They see where you are now, but they don't know where you've been. They don't know about the nights you went to bed hungry or the mornings you woke up cold." Samuel looked up, surprised. "But why do they care?" "Because it's easier to tear someone down than to build themselves up," Henry replied. "When people are unhappy, they look for someone to blame for their own struggles. Right now, they see you as a reminder of what they don't have." "So what do I do?" Samuel asked quietly. "You do what you've always done," Henry said firmly. "You work hard, stay kind, and don't let their words define you. The truth has a way of shining through, Samuel. And in time, even those who doubt you will see who you really are." Inspired by Henry's words, Samuel decided to take a stand. The next time someone made a snide comment, he didn't stay silent. "Yeah, I was lucky," he admitted, his voice steady but firm. "But luck didn't make me pull a man out of his car or help my mom when we had nothing. And luck isn't why I'm working hard now." The room fell silent, his classmates unsure how to respond. Slowly, the tide began to turn. While some continued to whisper, others started to see Samuel differently, recognizing the courage and determination behind his story. Meanwhile, Mary's work at the community center flourished. Inspired by her resilience, Henry began funding several of her initiatives, including a program to provide resources for struggling families in their town. Mary was hesitant at first, wary of taking more than she already had, but Henry insisted. "This isn't charity, Mary," he said. "It's an investment in something I believe in. People like you." With his support, Mary's programs grew, reaching families in need and creating a ripple effect of hope and kindness. One day, as Samuel walked home from school, he noticed a group of men lingering near his house. They didn't look familiar, and their behavior made him uneasy. When he got closer, one of the men stepped forward. "You're the kid, right? The one who saved Blackwell?" Samuel froze, his heart racing. "Who are you?" The man smirked. Let's just say we know who your new friend is, and we think he owes us something." Samuel darted inside, locking the door behind him. He told Mary what had happened, and she immediately called Henry. "This isn't just about us anymore," Mary said, her voice shaking. "They're targeting you, Henry." Henry took the threat seriously. Within hours, security was stationed around Mary and Samuel's home. He also contacted the local authorities, ensuring that the men would be dealt with swiftly. But Henry knew this wasn't just about protection. It was about ensuring that Samuel and Mary never had to live in fear again. Despite the scare, life continued to improve for the small family. Samuel found his place at school, earning the respect of his peers through his hard work and quiet confidence. Mary's programs continued to grow, touching more lives than she ever thought possible. And through it all, Henry remained by their side, not as a benefactor, but as a true friend and mentor. One evening, as they sat together under the stars, Henry looked at Samuel and Mary with a quiet smile. "You've both taught me something," he said, "that even in the hardest circumstances, people can find a way to rise. And when they do, they inspire others to do the same." Samuel nodded, his heart full. For the first time in his life, he felt not just lucky, but truly deserving of the life he was building. The weeks following the scare brought unexpected clarity to Mary and Samuel's lives. The threats had been dealt with decisively, thanks to Henry's swift action and his connections within the community. The men who had caused the trouble were arrested, and the family's safety was no longer in question. But the incident left a lasting impression on all of them. One quiet evening, Henry invited Mary and Samuel to his estate for dinner. After the meal, they walked through the sprawling gardens, the air filled with the sweet scent of blooming flowers. Under the glow of soft garden lights, Henry turned to them, his expression thoughtful. "Samuel," he began, "you've shown remarkable strength, not just in helping me that day, but in how you've handled everything since." Samuel, standing taller than he once did, met Henry's gaze. "I've had a lot of help," he said humbly, glancing at his mother. Henry chuckled softly. "True, but even with help, not everyone would have risen to the challenge the way you have. You've inspired me. Both of you have. And I've been thinking about how I can give back, not just to you, but to others like you." Mary tilted her head, curious. "What do you mean, Henry?" "I've decided to start a foundation," he said. "A program to support families and children who find themselves in difficult situations. It will provide education, housing, and resources to help them rebuild their lives." The news left Mary and Samuel speechless. Over the next few months, they watched as Henry worked tirelessly to bring his vision to life. He insisted that Mary take a leadership role in the foundation, her experience and resilience making her the perfect candidate. At first, Mary hesitated. "I'm not sure I'm qualified for this, Henry," she said one day, sitting in the sunlit office of the newly established foundation. "Nonsense," Henry replied. "You've lived this experience. Who better to guide others than someone who truly understands what they're going through?" And so, Mary stepped into her new role, overseeing programs that helped dozens of families within the first year alone. Meanwhile, Samuel continued to grow into his potential. With Henry's mentorship and Mary's unwavering support, he excelled in school, earning the respect of his peers and teachers alike. But Samuel's proudest moment came at a school assembly when he was invited to speak about his journey. Standing on stage, he looked out at the crowd of students, teachers, and parents. "I used to think life was just about surviving," he began, "but I've learned that it's about more than that. It's about helping each other, about finding strength even when things seem impossible. And it's about never giving up on yourself or the people you love. The applause that followed was thunderous, and Samuel felt a warmth in his chest that no words could describe. The years that followed were full of milestones and quiet joys. The foundation flourished, becoming a beacon of hope for countless families in need. Mary's leadership turned it into a respected institution, and Samuel became a symbol of what determination and kindness could achieve. Even Henry, who had once lived a life defined by his wealth and power, found new meaning in his work. He often spent time with Mary and Samuel, not as a benefactor, but as a cherished part of their extended family. One day, as they sat together on the porch of Mary's new home, Henry looked at Samuel with a smile. "You've taught me something, Samuel," he said, "that the smallest act of kindness can ripple into something extraordinary. Never forget that." Years later, when Samuel graduated college with honors, he dedicated his success to his mother and Henry. In his graduation speech, he said, "This isn't just my achievement. It's the result of the love and support of people who believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. And now, it's my turn to give back." True to his word, Samuel joined the foundation, working alongside his mother and Henry to continue the mission they had built together. Their story became a testament to the transformative power of compassion, resilience, and the unyielding belief that even the most challenging circumstances can lead to something beautiful. And as they stood together at the Foundation's annual gala, surrounded by the families they had helped, Samuel turned to his mother and Henry with a quiet smile. "We've come so far," he said. Mary nodded, her eyes glistening with tears. "And this is just the beginning." The lights of the gala sparkled around them, a reflection of the bright future they had built together. A future rooted in love, hope, and the simple, powerful act of choosing to care. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share to help spread the message of hope and kindness.